Well, there's 3 famous words I'm okay with using, and that's just I don't know.
This is session number 26 of the Podcast Engineering Show. We're ready to go. Yeah. Yes. Welcome back. Well, if you listened to previous episodes, welcome back. If this is your first time, put your seatbelt on. This is a really fun show about the audio engineering side of podcasting. That's right, it's the Podcast Engineering Show. I'm Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for a living for Forbes and Dun & Bradstreet, as well as select business authors. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We really talk shop on this show. This is not the show if you want to know about marketing and downloads and images and whatever else. This is not the show. This is not the podcasting show that talks about that. We talk about audio engineering, sound quality, how to handle bad quality, how to create good quality, and all that stuff. I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and since I entered podcasting about 4.5 years ago, I've noticed a huge lack of audio engineering skills with podcasters, so that's why this show is here. And, of course, Barry is with me, and I'm proud of myself. I'm remembering to stop the music and put up the fader again. Barry, are you ready to go? Barry, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, because you know our guest really likes your voice and everything, right, Barry?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is that all you're going to... Oh, there he is. Is that all you're going to say? Barry, what are we going to need for this episode to make it a really good episode for the listener?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Hey, Josh, I found a new sound clip from Barry. It says, I didn't copy it over from my other PC, but he's like, monkeys and pumas. I don't know why he was talking about it. It's classic. I'm gonna break that out. I'm also gonna break out another new one for you as well. So before I introduce my wonderful guest who's here with me, I want to just say that this show is brought to you by Podcast Engineering School. That's right. I'm gonna start teaching courses on EQ, compression, mastering, noise reduction, gating, everything, coming this fall, which is actually pretty close because by the time this comes out, it might actually be September already. So go to podcastengineeringschool.com and maybe one of the courses will be up there by now. Just so you know, I actually record episodes in advance, so we're like about a month ahead. So that's why I'm saying that. And also, Fractal Recording is my production company. You can listen and subscribe to this show anywhere you listen to a podcast, even iHeartRadio. It's amazing. Who's going to search for the Podcast Engineering Show on iHeartRadio? Anyway, that doesn't make sense.
A podcaster.
Exactly. So, real quick, I just want to say, and all right, let me introduce Josh because I want to ask him more questions. My guest today is Joshua Rivers. He's the owner of Podcast Guy Media, and the website is podcastguymedia.com, right, Josh?
Yes.
Yeah, and he's the host of the Creative Studio podcast. So you've been podcasting for a while, and you just started dipping your toe. Well, more than dipping your toe. You're doing some storytelling type episodes now, which I meant to go listen to, but I didn't get a chance to go yet. But I will. Creative Studio podcast. Check it out. And of course, Podcast Guy Media. You produce podcasts for other people, similar to what I do. But here's the thing, Josh. When you sit at your desk where you produce your audio, your chair is a certain height, right? Have you ever switched chairs to a chair of a different height?
I have, and it throws me off. It really does.
That's why I'm bringing it up, dude. I switched, and then I switched back. And my first chair was a little bit low, which I kind of liked because I don't know. It just I mean I used it for years. Then I switched to this other chair. It was literally a couple inches higher, which a couple inches makes a huge difference in chair height. And it just threw me completely off. It threw you off as well, Josh?
Yeah, and it's not just the height too, because I mean there's also the way it can like lean back and things. And so because different ones kind of lean back in a different way. You know, sometimes you're doing your work, you just kind of need to lean back, maybe stretch a little bit, and so if it doesn't lean back right, I mean, it throws me off too.
Totally, yeah. And you don't want to fall off the chair when you're producing podcasts.
Ooh, yeah, that hurts.
That hurts. So, Josh, we are going to talk about your workflow, about your equipment. We're going to get into all that. And so let's jump in. And by the way, if you're listening to this, we're not going to talk about chairs the whole time either. Trust me. So, Josh, we have a speed round at the very beginning, which is very quickly. It's 2 questions. It used to be 3 questions. I don't know if anyone remembers that from the first handful of episodes. 2 questions. We're going to go through the speed round first, and then we're going to sort of unpack everything and go through it in detail. So the first question is, what are the shows that you produce and engineer?
Okay. Well, the ones I produce, we mentioned the Creative Studio podcast, and my tagline for that is Podcasting Experiments. I actually started that, I guess it was 2 years ago. And maybe it was just last year. Yeah, it was last year. I started it. Time flies.
Right?
Or maybe it goes slow. Either way, I started it as a way to try to help people that were getting started with online content creation. So I started broad, which I know a lot of people say you shouldn't. You should niche down and all that kind of stuff. I started broad, just any kind of content creation online. So blogging, podcasting, video. I was trying to cover all of those things. And the first season encompassed all of that. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm doing this seasonal thing, so each successive season is going to go ahead and focus on a certain thing. So the second season, I focused on blogging and your website. And then season 3, I kind of went into how to podcast, just kind of some basics, maybe some intermediate type stuff there. And I decided to go ahead and stick with the podcasting because that's where my passion lies mostly, and there are some things that I wanted to dive into, and that led us into the season 4, which is what I'm going through right now, where I'm talking about narrative podcasting and how to be able to create basically a narrative, kind of defining that kind of NPR kind of style, documentary, journalistic, something along those lines, but it can also apply for like if you're actually creating an actual like a fiction story or telling some kind of thing like that. And so, anyway, so that's one podcast. CreativeStudio.academy is the website.
Nice.
And then the other ones I have produced myself is there's the 24 podcast, which has been on hiatus because there hasn't been a season aired for a while.
Oh, 24, the TV show.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Awesome show. I love it.
Okay.
And obviously, I would, if I didn't love it, I wouldn't podcast about it probably.
Right.
And so they're coming out with another one coming out here in January or something like that. I'm not sure if I'm going to bring the podcast back yet or not, just because of my workload. But it's there in case I want to.
Okay.
Then another one I'm doing that was actually my first podcast I started 3.5 years ago, the Success Road podcast. It actually started as Quality Living Made Simple, and I made a change, trying to change the focus a little bit and maybe something a little snappier.
Okay.
I don't know if I fully accomplished that or not. Anyway, so I did about 100 episodes, or a little over 100 episodes in the last 3.5 years, and I'm actually putting that to rest. Probably by the time this comes out, I'll be more or less done with that. I may come back later and bring it back, but at this point, I'm needing to set it down just so I can be able to focus on my business.
Right. So let's go through. So that's the first question. The second question is let's sort of overview your workflow and your equipment, your hardware. But let's do that because I know you have clients that you produce shows for, and I'm sure with the clients, you deal with a lot of different clients, and each of them has their own needs and their own workflow and all that. So for this question right now, let's talk about your show. Let's talk about the Creative Studio podcast, and talk about like just before you get ready to do an episode, where are you, what equipment, what's your mic, what's your signal flow, and then take us through all the way up to basically when it's mastered and you make the MP3. Just take us through it pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do have to say the current season I'm going through is completely different. If you want to learn more about that, you're going to have to listen to the podcast.
Right.
Because it's narrative style, so the flow is a lot different than what we would probably a typical podcast would be. So I'm going to go with what I would normally do if I was recording a solo or interview. So
yeah, and then maybe after that we can talk about the narrative, or then we can talk about what's different about your narrative process as well. Yeah.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
Yeah. So the microphone. I'll start with the equipment, kind of how I'm doing this here. So I have both an ATR2100 USB microphone that I have, and I also have a Heil PR40 that I acquired used from someone, so I got a discount, which is nice. And so, because he upgraded to, I can't remember what it was, RE320 or something like that. And so he had an extra PR40, and so I was able to get that from him. And so right now I'm currently using the PR40 as we're doing this.
Okay.
And so I have that going into my mixer, which I have a Behringer Q802 USB mixer. And so I wanted to get the USB so I can be able to plug that into my computer.
Right.
To be able to get the signal that way. And so I know a lot of people talk about trying to stick with analog, using the cables and all that kind of stuff. And I haven't really messed with a whole lot of that yet. This mixer is, I think I got it like 6 months ago or something like that. And I haven't been able to really mess with it and test it a whole lot. And so anyway, so I have that. And then I use Sennheiser HD 280 Pro headset or headphones. And so those do really well for me. They cut out a lot of the sound outside.
Okay.
So I can really focus on the editing. So I got those when I started editing, or actually about a year after I started editing for other people, so I can really hear what was going on and be able to be a lot more attentive to the details of what was being said. Before that, I had I don't even know what brand it was, but it was like a $10 headset thing that I got from a store, and it did okay for a while. I could hear the basics, but I wasn't too worried about the details at that time.
Right.
And so I just wanted to be able to hear the words. And so, but since I'm paying a lot more attention to the details, I upgraded my headset, and it's been really good.
Nice.
So as I am recording my episode, I normally have my notes that I have written out. I'll either have just bullet point outline, or I may actually like type it out as a blog post, and then read it almost verbatim. And so I've kind of gone back and forth between those two. And so I'll go through and I'll record. If I make a mistake, I'll sometimes I record into Audition. I should mention that too. So I use Audition. I used Audacity for about 2.5 years. I switched to Audition about a year ago. And so I've had a learning curve of trying to learn the ins and outs of that.
Right.
It's definitely a lot more robust than Audacity, and it functions a little bit differently. And so I like it. It makes it a lot easier with the editing, which is the reason why I switched. And so I record, and sometimes I'll just let it flow, and I'll just leave a space, and I'll start over again if I make a mistake. Or sometimes if I just get too frustrated, I'll just stop it and delete and go back and try to stitch it together that way.
And this is like a monologue then. This is if you do not have a guest, right?
Right. Okay. Yeah, if I have a guest, I typically record through Skype, and I have I'm using a free Skype recorder, iFree Skype Recorder, I think it's called. And for the most part, it's done well for me. I've had a couple issues. There was once it like just shut down on me, and so I lost the last part of the interview, which actually the guest was recording as well, so I was able to save that part, so that was good.
Nice.
And then
so that records, that software records on the same computer that Skype is running, and it records the guest like on their own track?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only issue I've had, and it's been a while since I've had the issue, is sometimes the two sides would get out of sync, and so one side would be moving just a hair faster, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of it's kind of weird. So it starts out okay, but then you get whatever, like a quarter of the way through, 5 minutes through, 10 minutes in, or whatever, and all of a sudden you're starting to step on each other because the timing is just a little bit off.
It starts to drift.
So yeah.
So
that's
wait,
the word.
But does it record it as one stereo file where you're on the left, your guest is on the right, or is it two discrete files?
No, it's records in stereo left and right,
and it still drifts.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, you get what you pay for, I guess. I mean, it's free, so I can't really complain a whole lot. And the only issue is I just got to look through, and when I go to work on it afterwards in post production, I'll separate the two sides so that they become mono individual files. And so then I just cut and I just kind of move and shift them around as I need to. And so it works, just takes a little bit extra work when that happens.
Right.
But it hasn't happened in a while, so that's actually a good thing.
Oh, cool. So you have your guests, and then you're recording it. You're recording straight into Audition.
Yeah. Not when I'm having a guest, but when I do it solo, I usually record it just straight into Audition. I do have a digital recorder or Tascam.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll record into that as well as a backup, which I'm not doing right now. So if this goes south, you're just out of luck.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There you go. And so I'll work it that way. But usually I just go straight into software, and I know there's pros and cons of both ways. And so I've had it happen where I recorded in my recorder and the sound just didn't come out right. But I have it more as a backup than as my main device.
Got it.
At this point. And so I'll go through, I'll finish editing, and usually for my own stuff, I'm not too picky on my editing level. I'll leave most of the stuff in. I'll sometimes cut some of the very obvious stuff. But usually I just kind of keep it a little more casual, I guess you could say.
Right.
But I do sometimes get heavy on the ums, and so I'll take some of those out. But I'll generally just kind of leave that, and so then I mix it down when I'm done, or I'll put in all the music and all that kind of stuff, because I mix that in afterwards, and so I just drop that in where it needs to be.
Right.
And then I'll mix it down. I'll go MP3. Usually for my stuff, I'll do 96 mono, and I'll do it that way. 44. What is that? 44.1.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what I do. And then, of course, then I upload it and all that kind of stuff.
Right, tag it and upload it. Sweet. All right. And then, like I said before, when you work with your clients, I'm sure you do things a little bit differently. I'm sure the workflow is a little different. So now, where are you? You're in your house. What kind of room are you in? Is it soundproofed? Tell me about your space there.
I have. I am in my house, in my office, home office. There's a nice big window. There are walls that have virtually nothing on them. I have all kinds of hard surfaces all over the place, but I do have carpet, and so
okay.
So it's not a very sound treated room at all, which I'm thinking at some point maybe I'll do, but and I probably noticed some difference, but I haven't noticed anything that's been really glaring to where it's like, oh, I really need to take care of this. Yeah,
I mean, I don't hear that you're in an echoey room or a reverby room at all. I mean, sounds fine to me. But you are speaking into a PR40, and I've heard that the PR40 has a pretty tight cardioid pattern, and it rejects the sound from the sides and the rear, especially the rear, very well. Is that what you found?
Yeah, I believe so. And so I haven't done like testing or whatever a whole lot to try different things, but it works well, so I just leave it.
Right. Yeah, that's it. So look, that's life. Who has time to, like your mixer? You said, you haven't really messed with your mixer to the 10th degree because you have a life and a family. Mm-hmm. All right, so you have your mic going into your mixer. Now the USB mixer is interesting because I've never used the USB mixer, but I'm assuming that in the computer there's software that comes up where there's levels and you can sort of do your routing there if you wanted to, right?
I think there is, but I haven't used that.
Got it.
I just turn my knobs physically, and then it just sends the signal to Audition. And so, but I think there is some kind of software or something that I could use if I wanted to. Right.
So you can line up, channel 1 on the mixer goes to track 1 in Audition, and channel 2 goes to track 2. Yeah, I'm sure that's easy to.
Yeah, I believe
set
so.
It that way.
Yeah, but again, I just haven't messed with it that way.
Right. So your PR40, do you have that on like a boom arm with a shock mount and all that?
I do, and it's a cheap one. I actually just 5-10 minutes before we jumped on our conversation, me and my kids were scrambling around trying to find the right size wrench so we can tighten it down because one of the connections came loose, and so the mic was drooping too much. And so I may invest in a better boom arm at some point because I got it for my ATR 2100, and there's a big weight difference between the ATR 2100 and the PR40. And so the PR40 is a lot heavier, so it takes a little bit more for it to stay up.
Got it. And do you and I both know the gentleman who you got the PR40 from?
I believe so. Daryl Darnell.
Oh, that's who I thought it was. Daryl, he was on, I don't know what episode he was, but he's been on the show. That was a great episode as well. Yeah. You live sort of close to him.
Yeah, I do. About half hour, something like that.
Nice.
I've been to his house and invaded his invaded his studio a couple times.
Nice. And just send him away. So. Say, Daryl, I'm going to do some recording in here. Please leave me alone.
Yeah. and actually, that's where I tested the PR40 first. And so I was just at his house, and we were just talking and kind of bouncing things off each other and all that kind of stuff. And I saw this microphone. I said, hey, can I test that out real quick?
Nice.
And so, yeah, so I got to test it out. And I'm like, yeah, I like the way that sounds. And so because I heard some people say, well, it's a little too bassy for my voice and all that kind of stuff. And so I personally like the way it sounds with my voice, so I'm like, okay, that's nice. I'll have to put that on my wish list. And then it was, 6 months later that he's upgraded, and I was able to snag that from him.
Nice. Yeah, on your voice, it's nice and smooth, right? The PR40 is a very smooth sounding mic. So, and that's one thing I think some people don't like. If it's not a match for some people, because sometimes it's not biting enough. It's not like. It's too smooth, basically. So, but for your voice, it definitely works.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, Josh, I said I was going to prepare some special Barry clips just specifically for you.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember this one. Well, hold on. The question is, so, Josh, what is someone going to need to really produce a good podcast?
You're going to need a couple of horses or a couple of mules.
Anything else?
Saws, hammers, nails.
Really? Anything else on the list?
Beans, coffee, and biscuit. And a little piece of fatback.
All right. What was that last one, Barry?
Beans, coffee, and biscuit. And a little piece of fatback.
There you go. Anything else, Barry?
Monkeys, pumas. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
There you go. There's a few new ones. Barry, wait. It looks like you want to say something, Barry.
I think I dozed off or something.
Why is that?
Oh, God. Oh. Barry, you don't normally doze off, do you?
I don't think so.
Oh, God. And the other ones I got for you, I don't know how to set this up. So, Barry, you listen to... no, I don't want to use your show. Oh, Barry, you listen to Ralph Rivera's podcast, right, with him and his wife? And what happened? What did you think about after you listened to their podcast?
And they were cussing up a storm. Profanities left, profanities right. Every second word was a F word.
Wow.
I got to play them again. Hold on.
And they were cussing up a storm. Profanities left, profanities right. Every second word was a F word.
Oh, wow.
That's it. So I guess we got to get back to the show now.
Awesome.
What was your favorite one?
Like a good idea. Oh, man. Oh.
Saws,
I don't know.
hammers, nails.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, I love that, man.
Monkeys, pumas. Yeah.
Where did he get pumas from, right? Who says
I don't
puma?
know, but I don't know, but I mean, must help make a podcast though.
And Barry, one more thing though, before we move on with the show, Barry, what do you think about Josh Rivers, our guest?
Trust me, this man is on the money.
Excellent.
There you go.
You're definitely my favorite, Barry.
and I might as well pull. We're going nuts here. So Barry, when it comes to the frequency range, Barry, you got the low end, the mid, and the high end. What frequency range is your favorite, Barry?
The bottom. The bottom.
Really? All right. I'm not sure why you think that, but
oh man. Oh, this is hilarious. I love it.
It's tremendous.
Oh, whatever we could do to be able to help people make better podcasts sound better.
Beans, coffee, and biscuit, and a little piece of fat back.
I don't know what that
There you
means. Go. All right.
Oh. And actually, my kids are a fan of Barry too, and so
really,
well, what happened is when I started listening to your podcast, you were already—I don't remember what episode number, probably like 15 or 20 or so, somewhere between there. And so I did a lot of binge listening, and so I was hearing a lot of Barry in a very short amount of time. So I would come home to my kids, and I would start going, "No way, yeah, oh yeah," and so like, "What are you doing?" And so I shared a couple of this stuff with them, and so they became a fan of Barry as well. So, but by the way, this is a confession. I don't listen to the podcast for any of the advice or anything. I listen for Barry.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's it. So let's talk about Audition, and I want to talk about audio processing as well, as far as EQing and compression and things like that. So when you record, for instance, on your Behringer mixer, do you process your voice at all through the mixer, or you just basically go through flat?
I have just a twinge of low, mid, and high. It probably just cancels out. I mean, because I got them almost about equal for each other.
Oh, okay.
There is a little bit of compression there. It's about 12 o'clock.
On the board?
On the board, something like that.
On the mixer, okay.
Yeah, it looks like I think that's what it's for.
Okay, yeah. I mean, some of the boards have that. They have it's a compressor, but it's literally one knob, so you don't actually get to choose your, the ratio and basically when you turn the knob, you're basically adjusting the threshold, kind of when it kicks in and how much it kicks in. It can be very handy at times, actually.
Yeah, the big thing I've noticed with it, again, I haven't played a lot with it. I kind of tweaked it just a little bit before we got on, just so I could say I did it. Is the biggest thing I noticed, at least just looking at the sound waves on the thing and listening to it, it seemed to just kind of just make it a little bit louder. And so, I didn't do any extensive testing on it to see if it like brought lows up and highs down and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, in general, so that compressor on the Behringer mixer, it's one knob. So when you adjust it, it's kind of like you're adjusting the threshold of when it kicks in. But also, I'm sure there's a makeup gain. There's an automatic makeup gain as well. So as you start to compress the signal, it'll boost the entire level, and that's why you're perceiving that it's louder, because it does. It's louder and it sounds louder. That's what a compressor does. So, I mean, the whole point of a compressor is to take the lowest volume parts of the signal and basically bring it up above the sound floor, right? The classic example is riding a car down the road. If your radio gets too low, the road noise drowns it out. So now, once you have everything in Audition, what kind of processing do you do within Audition?
Actually, on myself, I don't usually do a whole lot, really.
Okay.
I did try out a little bit with the multiband compressor, and so because there's a broadcast preset, and I've heard a lot of people say that they use that, and so I've tested with that a little bit. And sometimes I've liked it, sometimes I didn't. And so I kind of messed with that a little bit.
Okay. And then as far as the overall mix, well, what about the person on Skype? What do you do with them usually?
Usually not much with them either. Okay. But most of the time I only mess with stuff if it's for a client and working with them. Now, I have used the hard limiter a couple times just kind of playing around, just because there were some times when some things were like really pushing the limit. I wanted to back it down just a little bit without affecting all of the volume. So instead of doing the amplify thing to bring it up or down,
right?
Used a hard limiter. That way the quieter stuff was still the same, but it would limit the louder parts a little bit.
Right.
And so I have used that a little bit. And so for guests, for clients, as I work on some of their stuff, they have different things that they want. There's one lady I do for her podcast, and she likes to add a little bit of bass or a little low end to hers. And so she started, it was basically her first time really listening to her voice, and so recorded. And so usually when you listen to yourself, it's usually a little, you hear more of the treble when you hear it yourself as opposed to in your head. And so she was thinking that she needed to add a bunch of bass to be able to make her voice sound right. And so she started at a certain level, and she's actually come down quite a bit to where we're putting very little on there now, but we do that.
Nice.
I think she's just getting used to it. She's realizing, okay, I don't need to add all that to make my voice sound natural. And so
right. Yeah, that's classic beginner kind of thing. Like, oh, I need more bass, more bass, more bass. Everyone always wants more bass to sound bigger and radio-like. But
yeah, exactly. You really need to get that bass going.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Where's mine? Where's mine? Here we go. Oh, yeah, baby. There we go.
Yeah, I try to stay away from too much bass because of the underwater effect it does. And so, yeah, just a little bit to kind of give that richness, but not too much.
Yeah, the big downside to bass can be intelligibility and just level. You know, bass adds a lot more level. So if you level voices equally, a voice that's EQ'd properly is going to sound a lot louder than a voice that has too much bass in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah. So, but that's what everyone does. Give me more bass and more high end, and then they turn up the bass and the high end so much that it doesn't sound good. Yeah, it's total balance. All right. So then, how about loudness? I know within Audition, there's probably somewhere where you can set the loudness, right?
I think there is. I really haven't messed with it too much. Most of the time, I just kind of look and see where the levels fall as far as the dB,
the stereo meter.
And yeah, that's most of what I go by. But I have used, I don't have this off on the top of my head because it's been a while since I've actually used it. But they do have they have a speech volume leveler, and I've had, and so I guess that does more of leveling voices rather than the loudness. But yeah, I mean they do have something. So I normally just kind of look at the levels. But I've also used Auphonic, which I know you've talked about a lot. It's come back, and just recently you had somebody on from Auphonic to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I've used Auphonic to be able to kind of do that. There's been some times I've done Auphonic first just to be able to bring the levels to where they're supposed to be, clean up a little bit of the background noise, and get that stuff set, and then I'll work on it.
Yeah.
And process after that. Then there's been other times when I've worked the file and then I put it through that. And I think most of the time I get better success actually running it through Auphonic first, getting that stuff taken care of and then working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually done it both ways as well too. And it's funny when I put something through, like I'll put something through Auphonic first if it's really just a difficult piece of audio. Like if I know it's just going to be a pain in the butt, I'll just put it through Auphonic just to see what it does. And it usually does help. And then after that, you can tweak it a little more and then you're good to go. One thing I found when I put things through Auphonic, a lot of times when it comes back from Auphonic, I hear more S's. Like most of the time, I think, probably more than 50% of the time, the S's of the voices are pronounced. And so you gotta be careful with the S's because that can be very annoying and even painful to the ear.
Yes.
So yes, yes. So a lot of times from Auphonic, I'll have to use a de-esser afterwards, which works okay as long as it's not too bad. Because de-essers are good at taking out the S's, but if someone has really nasty sibilants, it's hard. Even with the de-esser, it's hard. I just thought of the other day, I'm like, you know what? I never used 2 de-essers in a row. Like, use one de-esser and just feed it to another de-esser and then get the output. So I'm going to try that soon. I'm going to use 2 de-essers for the next voice that is super sibilant.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah, I normally try to avoid, like if I use one kind of effect or processing, and if I have to do something to correct something that did, I normally try to avoid that. But like you're talking about, like if I put it through and then also I got to do 1 or 2 other things to correct something that happened from that, it's like, I mean, is it? I listen. It's like it's not a whole lot better than the way you started with sometimes, and so I sometimes try that, and it's like and then I just scrap it back, go back to 0, and so
right,
I've had that happen a couple times.
Right, and then just do it manually. Yeah.
So
the overall loudness level of your final files is, it's that LUFS thing, right? Everyone's saying minus 16 stereo, minus 19 mono, all that. I think there is something in Audition that does that automatically. Like you can say, hey, the output should be, minus 16.
Yeah, I think so. Like, yeah, and actually here just the last couple of weeks, I looked it up and I saw Mike Russell from Music Radio Creative. He had something that was showing that. I didn't get a chance to look at that yet to be able to adjust that. And so, because I do want to learn that, but I just, again, my time, and it's like I got other things to look at.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely on my list to be able to really dive into being able to really, I mean, I understand it, but to really understand it more and how to be able to apply it without just going through a phonic only. And so I'll be able to see what I could do outside of that to make that work.
Yeah. I think these days the whole loudness standard is going to be built into all the software. I mean, I'm using some software that hasn't been updated in a couple of years, 2-3 years. So I know there's no LUFS meters in there and all this stuff. I'm sure I could get a plugin that does it. I'm still doing it the old-fashioned way with, the RMS levels, which is very similar to LUFS. But so let me ask you this: when you're producing audio, and like give me some examples of some bad sounding audio you've heard, and then kind of what you did to make it sound better.
Well, as far as as I'm editing somebody, some of the big, I guess this probably gets into more technique on their end, but when they start a sentence and then they get a couple words in and then they start over again, or they completely change thoughts, and then to be able to find the right way to be able to stitch that together that sounds right. But that kind of goes a different direction what the show's about.
Well, no, but editing is part of the show. I mean, this is something we got to do. So yeah, that definitely happens. I mean, people start and stop and then talk, and then you got to you try to cut something out, but a lot of times when you cut it out, it still sounds awkward in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. And so it really takes a lot of practice and an ear to really hear what makes it sound right. But like with that, there's sometimes I'm editing and they're starting a sentence. I can't think of a specific example, but they start a sentence and then there's a pause. And then they continue the sentence, but they repeat a couple of the same words that they ended on. So they said, here, we're going to walk to the store. And so to be able to combine those to where they're not double talking, but then it makes it flow right. So I've had to play around. Sometimes it works to just keep the first walk to and then cut the second one right where it's at and then just continue the sentence. Sometimes I've actually blended the two to where they kind of overlap a little bit, and it sometimes it sounds okay.
Right.
Or it's actually sometimes it sounds better to be able to do that than it does and so it's really more an art form with doing that than it is a science of directly like this is what you do.
Yes.
And so
yeah, there's a lot of feel to that. Even spaces, like people, even the last episode with Chris Saunders, he was saying how he uses the silence truncator, right? If there's like 2 seconds of silence, the program will automatically chop it down to like, I forget what it was, like 0.7 seconds or something. But even silence, sometimes if you cut out silence, it sounds weird, and you just have to leave a little bit of a longer gap because that's more natural. So there's definitely a lot of feeling to editing.
Yeah, that is probably one of my down points that I struggle with, is leaving silence, because it helps me in one aspect, but it's a downplay in the editing area. As I listen to podcasts at 2x speed usually, and so if I'm used to listening at 2x speed, the silences and the spaces are obviously twice as short when you're listening to 2x, and so then when I go and listen at 1x, I hear that gap, and it's like, man, that's like a huge gap. Let me cut that down, and so I've done that where I sent something to the client. They're like, whoa, hey, there's like no spaces in between the people talking. And then I go back, I'm like, oh yeah. And so it's like I go back through and add those spaces back in to make it a little more natural. And so that's one of my downfalls.
Yeah, that is it. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I struggle with, is trying to do that, and then all the working with the double talk and restarts and all the ums and all that kind of stuff. And so I probably half my clients, I'm doing like a really detailed editing on, where I'm taking out pretty much all of that stuff, but still trying to make it sound natural.
Right.
And so then I'm going through, and they'll start a sentence, or they'll combine an with a word. And so and different things like that. And it's like, man, I mean, why can't you just leave a space and then make it easy to be able to cut that thing out? And so I'll sometimes spend 30 seconds to a minute trying to really dissect that combined word with an and then I finally come back and I'm like, man, I can't do this where it sounds right, so I'll just leave it in.
Exactly. And dumb. And dumb is the most popular one, I think. And you can't separate it. I mean, I've done it. You can, if you want to spend 15 minutes on one instance of and dumb to just get it, because you got to cut it right, then you got to fade it right, and you can do it.
And it's even worse. It's even worse when if they just do and dumb. That's one thing, but then if they go and it's like, oh, come on! I mean, you can't make that sound natural when you. I mean, because otherwise you just got and it's like, okay. I mean, that it makes it really difficult when you're when they really draw that out, because obviously they're thinking and they're trying not to say and then they end up saying it anyway. Yeah. But
one thing, some of my clients actually record in rooms that are very reverby, and it sounds like they're in a tunnel. And funny thing with that is when they say the actually has a reverb that lasts like a second more. So if you cut out the just the main waveform of the it sounds weird, because it'll be going along and then you'll just hear, like, you'll hear the reverb of the but you didn't hear the actual So it's you gotta watch that, and it's especially worse when someone says, so I did this. So they said and so. Now the again has a lot of reverb on it. The reverb from the continues underneath the so and probably the next word too. So if you cut out the right to the so, right to the S of the so, when they start coming in with the S of the so, like, you not only hear the so, but you hear this huge reverb in the room, and you're like, it makes you like freak out. It's like, what was that? Like, what the hell was that? Because it's totally unnatural.
Yeah.
So
yeah, good point. Yeah, I haven't had a whole lot of that, but I think I've had it. Yeah. So
when someone's on Skype and they sound like absolute rubbish, how do you fix it? What do you do?
Oh, you mean like when they turn into a robot?
No. I mean the sound quality. Like if someone has I'm talking the sound quality. Yeah.
Okay.
Or you just kind of leave it. You just compress it and.
Yeah, I normally just try to do a little bit. A little bit of compression, a little bit, just to try to make it sound not as bad.
Right.
But I mean, as they say, I mean, you can only make bad audio sound not as bad. I mean, so it's never going to be great.
Yeah. So a lot of times, in fact, I just had one. It was this guy who was talking into his computer. He was a guest on a show. Was not one of my client hosts. It wasn't a host. It was a guest. And guests, they don't care. They're just coming on the show one time, and they don't really care about sound quality. Most guests. And he was talking right into his computer, and it was the most mid-rangey sound I've ever heard. Like, there was no low end, and even the high end kind of trailed off. So I put in a little bit of high end, but I had to add so much low end just to give it some body, or else it sounded like he was on the phone, or even worse than the phone. And so I had to add like a bunch of low mid and a lot of low as well, a lot of low end, just to make it, similar to the other voices as well. And of course, the other side of that coin is the people who, a lot of microphones, again, I've said this before, but a lot of microphones have a way too much low end, and you just have to roll that off. You just have to take out a bunch of the bass just to make it clear. It's not even like, oh, add more bass to my voice so I sound cool. It's not that. It's like, no, it's low end that does not sound good, and it's muddy, and we need to clean it up. So those are some ways that I've cleaned up some stuff.
Yeah, EQ is one of the things I really need to work on more. I know enough to get in trouble. And
oh, jeez.
But a thought I just had as you were saying that is about rolling off the low end. And something I've come across a couple times is where I hear something and my first thought is to add. And so instead of rolling off the low end, maybe adding to the high end. And sometimes that makes it worse.
Right.
So then it's the thing where you really have to list it and see, okay, well, what's better to add or to take away?
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to give my workshop on EQ. I just gave one here locally a few weeks ago, and it was tremendous. Because there's so many practical tips I share about how to actually do. Like, first, how to assess what you're hearing. What am I hearing? That's the first step. And then there's things you could try first, like rolling off the low end, which I've said before. I do that first. I think every voice I ever EQ, I immediately grab the low end filter and just roll off low end and just hear it. See if it sounds good. See, I roll it off so much it sounds like a telephone, and then I turn it off. I roll it so it's not rolling off anything, and I'll sit there and play with that for 20 seconds, and then I'll just you end up knowing right where it should be. Roll it off from 60 hertz or 70 hertz or 100 hertz, but you hear it. You hear the difference, and then. But the mid range is anyway when you first assess a sound. It's really all about the mid range, because, like you said, if there's too much low end, you feel like adding high end. But when you know where the mid range is first, then you know, okay, in relation to the mid range, should I add high end or not? Or should I take away low end or not? So that kind of solves those problems.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're coming out of audition, you're tagging it and bagging it and uploading it and all that. Now, real quick, because we're almost out of time, but I did want to quickly go through the narrative workflow. Just tell us what's different. What do you do different when you're producing episodes that are of the narrative type?
Okay, obviously there are some variations, but basically what I'm working with and what I'm teaching through the podcast is you're basically, you come up with the storyline that you're trying to tell, whether you're telling a story about a person, about a place, and what I'm doing is it's more of a documentary, and I'm kind of covering topical, which is how to create a narrative by doing a narrative style. And so I went through, I created what I needed to do as far as like the topics I wanted to cover, all the kind of stuff. I went and I recorded all the interviews and I covered those topics with all the different people. Some of them obviously didn't apply to every person I talked to,
right?
Because they specialize in certain areas.
So,
but anyway,
let's crystallize it real quick. How many guests did you interview, and how many topics were in your outline?
I started with 10 topics, and I changed some things and ended up with 10 in the end. Because after I did the first couple interviews, I realized that there were some things that they were really similar. They were too similar to be separate questions or topics. And then there was a couple other things that came up that it's like, oh, well, that would be a good topic on its own. And so I ended up with 10 in the end. Okay. And I had 11 interviews.
11 interviews. And as you did each interview, you would touch on all 10 of the questions, or if some didn't apply, you would just leave them out.
Right. Yeah, I would ask, but then they would say, not really. And
Got it.
And so, well, there was a couple guests that I knew that they really didn't do that part anyway. And so, because there was a couple people that they didn't actually create narrative, but they had listened to, and so they were kind of giving it from a listener's perspective. There is one guy that he's more of a video creator, and so he was coming from a video perspective. So some of the things didn't quite apply, but some definitely things that can cross over.
Okay, so you did the 11 interviews and you touched on all the topics, and now production wise, what did you do next?
And then it's a matter of cutting it all down to little pieces, because I have 11 people talking about 10 topics, so I have to cut up each interview and put the different clips into each topic.
Right.
And
you have 10 topics. So in the end, your plan was to have 10 podcast episodes. Mm-hmm. And so the first podcast episode was on topic number 1. So you clipped out from each of the 11 guests, you clipped out the topic number 1 question, and that's what you're going to use in that first topic number 1 episode.
Right.
Yeah. And then,
and so,
yep.
and the way I did it, I realized there's probably some better ways to do it, but the way I originally did it is I had all of the 11 episodes, all the files open in one project in Audition, and then I just clipped each one. I put each one, each track then would become a topic, and so I would, I don't know, maybe it's harder, yeah, and so
no, I get it.
So track 1 would be topic 1, and I actually was able to rename it so that when I was looking at it, I could easily see which one was which.
There you go.
And so then I would end up, and then when I was done cutting all the pieces up, I could have a visual from top to bottom, topic 1 to 10, of all the different things. I could see, okay, well, in topic 1, I have 30 minutes of audio clips. In topic 2, I have 10 minutes of audio clips. I have 110 minutes on topic 3. And then I would take each track and I would put that into its own Audition project.
Right. So
I would work on that individually. And after I did that, I didn't do it for the first couple, but then I had those individual topic ones. I had that mixed down to an MP3, and I had a transcript made of that. That way I can be able to read it and visually see what was being said, and I marked up the transcript and was able to cut things from there. And then from there I went back to Audition and I cut the audio there. And so then after while I was doing all of that, I would also arrange the clips then in what was hopefully a logical way to be able to flow through that topic.
Right.
And then I'd have to see, okay, what are the guests talking about and what narration is needed to be able to fill in the gaps.
Right.
And so, because the goal is to hopefully have the guest tell as much of the information as possible.
Right.
And then narrate only what you have to. And so I would go through and I would do that. So then I would I would actually script out everything I would have to say. And then in just one session, I would just record it all, leaving spaces between where all the different clips were supposed to go.
Right.
And then I would just piece it all together in Audition. And then I would add all the music that I needed for transitions and things like that to try to keep the interest. And I've been doing it kind of quick because I'm doing this on the side. I'm working a full-time job, have the side business, and working with homeschooling my kids and all that kind of stuff. So this is a really side on the side kind of thing. And so I didn't take the time to like find the absolute best music for the different pieces. And so I found something that was good, at least good enough. Okay. And so sometimes I would have to where most of the time when I'm talking as narrator, I would have music playing underneath me, but not during the guests. Just kind of make it stand out
right
a little bit differently. And then there were sometimes when I would not have music playing under me because I would be trying to, again, I would like have music start and then it would stop. I would make a point to make that stand out. Then the music would start again. And so learning to be able to try to make those judgment calls, and then being able to make it fade and transition between one part to the next and all that kind of stuff. And then I would also go through and I would try to find some kind of teaser clip or clips that I could be able to put at the beginning to kind of draw attention to certain things and maybe catch interest. And so sometimes put things in there that I like sound totally out of context. And so just to really kind of like, what's all that about? And so
yeah.
And so there's one clip I actually use in most of my episodes right near the beginning, because it kind of goes along with my theme, which is about experimenting. So podcasting experiments. And one of the guests, Elsie Escobar, she made a statement at one time in the conversation to where she said, "Oh, and you should totally do that. You should say, like, you do it like this, and then you break the mold." And so that totally goes with the whole theme of experimenting. You try something and see if it works. If it doesn't work, then you don't. You have these set rules, so to speak, of what you're supposed to do or how you should do it, and then you start with that, and then you go off grid, see what happens, and then you're just experimenting with it. And so I have that in almost all of them right there near the beginning. And so kind of part of my tagline, I guess.
That is pretty cool. So look, if you're listening to this and you want to hear what Josh has been doing, the show's called Creative Studio Podcast, and the link will be in the show notes for this episode. And again, Creative Studio Podcast. It's season 4, you said, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So check out season 4. Start from the beginning, obviously, because I'm sure it all builds on each thing. Yeah,
it does.
So this has been great, Josh. I'm so happy you could come on. I really appreciate learning more about your workflow and your equipment, and I just like the listeners, I can't wait to hear Creative Studio Podcast to see what you're doing. So thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you can go to podcastguymedia.com as well. Podcast Guy Media, that's your production company where you're producing podcasts for other people and companies and all that. And of course, next week we will have another episode of the Podcast Engineering Show. And of course, I'm going to have to get a new Barry clip for Josh. So you know what? You might have to make an appearance. You might have to podjack an episode real soon to come on so you can hear the new clip, Josh.
Oh, I love that.
All right. So until next time, you know what to do, everybody. Sound great. Yeah. Oh.
You walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. But you're playing out on me now. You like to lose control well. That things we did still hold that meaning? And does it mean